Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the SOM TV podcast. I'm your host, Jason Wise. On today's episode, I am going to tell the story of a tiny wine that defied all expectations, a carbonic wine that came out of nowhere and sort of took, I would say, honestly, the drinking world by storm. I'm calling this Lightning in a Bottle, and we are going to tell the story of Stolpman's Love You Bunches line of wines, which really changed a lot of things. It was right place, right time, but it's an amazing story. Before I get to that conversation with Pete Stolpman, I want to tell you, today's episode, the SOM TV podcast, is brought to you by Curate. Are you confusing Chardonnay with Viognier? Or Pouilly-Fuissé with Pouilly-Fumé in blind tastings? You know, if you're a SOM TV listener, there's no way you're doing that. But you're not alone if you are. Curate's Blind Tasting Mistake Map is a free interactive guide that highlights 30 of the most common aroma group slip-ups across key varietals and regional styles. Whether you're prepping for the Court of Master Sommeliers or the WSET, it's packed with targeted tips to help speed your studies and improve your tasting accuracy. Prepare smarter, not harder with Curate. Your palate will thank you. Go to www.curate.wine to get the mistake map for free. Then level up with Curate's full blind tasting practice suite for sommeliers and wine studiers at 25% off for 3 months with code SOMTV, valid through October 2025. Go to www.curate.wine to get the best wine study app you can. Without further ado, my conversation on Love You Bunches and Lightning in a Bottle with Pete Stolpman. Pete, I'm honored to welcome you on the show today. I called you up and said, look, here's what I want to do. I want to hear a good story, one that's positive. I needed something. So everybody's in a negative space in the wine world right now. And I knew of one story that I could come to, one person, a glowing light that you are, Pete Stolpman, to cheer me up today. So welcome to the show. With that intro.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be a glowing light.
Hopefully people are watching this, but your complexion is quite fair. You are glowing to me right
Alabaster,
now.
yeah.
Alabaster, some would say. You are behind Stolpman Wines, Stolpman Vineyards. What's the proper nomenclature there?
Yeah, I think the official name would be Stolpman Vineyards. That's
Vineyards.
Kind of what my dad fell into. It actually goes all the way back to, vineyard destinations in the 1990s where, it was kind of chosen for us. I'm sure it was written on a way tag back when we were selling fruit to winemakers. And when Adam Tolmack decided to make an Ojai Vineyard Stolpman designate, he threw Stolpman Vineyards on the label. And when it came time to make our own wine, the name, the brand had already been made for us.
That was it. It's tough when it's your last name. It's hard to quit.
I like it that way. I'm all in. There's no exit plan, and having an eponymous brand makes it all the more so.
For listeners who aren't maybe familiar with your wines, we've done an episode on you guys and family and all of this, and you are behind a number of wines. So it's not just what we're going to talk about today, but we are going to talk about the story of Love You Bunches, which is a carbonic wine that, in my opinion, from my vantage point, really, it took off, but also in a really measured way. It wasn't something that exploded and disappeared like a fad or a trend. It kind of picked up steam, kept rolling. And now it is a thing where when my wife's friends come over, they bring a bottle of wine, and often it's one of the Love You Bunches wine. And I have to go, where did you hear about this? And they're like, well, I got it at the grocery store. Or this is what the guy at the wine shop recommended to me, or this is just my go-to wine. Which, to break into that kind of like moms are picking up this wine on their own accord, that is about as good as it gets, I would assume, for somebody like you who's trying to sell a product that has meaning and replicate it. Before we talk about Love You Bunches, what are the other kinds of wines? Why don't you give people a quick refresher on where you're located and the kind of wines and grapes you guys grow really fast, because that'll lead into your So Fresh wines.
The deep dive. We are located right in the heart of Santa Barbara wine country. The area is known as Ballard Canyon. Ballard Canyon Road connects the towns to the south, Buellton and Solvang, to the town northeast of us, Los Olivos, where our tasting room is, and where you can find about 25, 30 other tasting rooms and a few great restaurants. So yeah, Ballard Canyon. To our west, everybody is growing Pinot and Chard. Then Santa Rita Hills would be that AVA. To our east, we have Los Olivos district, and then Happy Canyon. And then you're getting into more Bordeaux, a lot of Sauvignon Blanc out there. Dad bought the property in 1990. There was nothing going on in Ballard Canyon, just a bunch of cows and rolling beautiful hills. Dad had been obsessed with limestone, finding chalk near the ocean, 218 acres, again, all limestone, all beautiful hill exposures. The whole ranch is kind of tilted south, but with 3 different ridges. Drilled a well and planted kind of 20 acres and then 20 acres and then 20 acres. At one point, Dad had all 5 Bordeaux varietals planted. We don't have any Bordeaux anymore. And that was really just having to take a shotgun approach. We had no weather data, no climatic data. And when you're out in Ballard Canyon on a July or August or even September day, you feel hot. Right. Yeah. But you may not even notice there's a pretty brisk breeze coming in off the Pacific. So the vines actually feel much cooler than we do as big, thick humans. As long as the vines are fluttering in that cold wind, we perform as a much cooler climate than we thought. And in 1993, Dad had planted Syrah, and that was the thing that took off immediately. In that time, Dad was spending time in Rome. His first career, he was a trial lawyer, and he was preparing a case against the Vatican, suing the Pope. We're a good Catholic family. Mm-hmm. And Dad fell in love with Sangiovese and Nebbiolo. And he had really an inkling of the Calatal movement going on in Napa in the late 80s. And by 94, it had been declared dead, that, all that Sangiovese was being grafted over to Cabernet. The establishment up in the north had given up on Italian varietals, and kind of and the wine media, the evil wine media, had kind of jumped on that and said, Sangiovese doesn't work. They weren't really talking about Nebbiolo. It's really Sangiovese. Does not work in California. Everybody should plant Cab. Cab is the new thing. And that's what happened up there. And, when you get on the 101 from the vineyard, there's a sign that says 298 miles to San Fran. And then you have to go another hour and a half, 2 hours to get to Napa. I mean, that is a long way north of us. So thankfully, Dad didn't take heed on what was going on, 400 or 350 miles to our north. He got back from Italy and asked Ruben, who's our longtime vineyard manager and the godfather of my kids, Ruben, can we plant Sangiovese and Nebbiolo? Like, I need this on our vineyard. And luckily, Ruben and his partner Jeff tracked down probably a suitcase clone up in Napa, allegedly from Isola e Elena in Chianti Classico. Mm-hmm. And that's what we planted. 10 acres at Sangio, 10 acres in Nebbiolo, 1994. And it's always been continuously a big passion for my dad. And yeah, we actually, our classic real Sangiovese continues to be our number one seller in the tasting room, the biggest seller for our wine club. And yeah, if you walk around the valley here, and mention Stolpman, you're likely to hear like, oh yeah, great Sangiovese, but we have, 20 acres now of Sangiovese. We have over 90 acres of Syrah. You go to Oslo or Stockholm or Tokyo, and you mention Stolpman to Assam, and then, Syrah. Really, since the mid-90s, we have been a Syrah producer. But then we've always had this big Italian side project. But until Lovey Bunches came along, there was virtually no distribution. It was all direct to consumer. People tried it at our tasting room, fell in love. And it's we have a lot of those like, multiple lives that we live. As you mentioned, we make a lot of wine. So these days I'm trying to cut back, but like Lovey Bunches, like when we have an idea that we get excited about, we have to try it. And then sure. If customers love it, then all of a sudden we have another wine. And I think that's these days one of the most rewarding things. It's like, if I love something and we bottle it, and, we've learned a lot about packaging, like put an attractive or interesting package on it. It's so fulfilling to see that cuvee sell out. And I think that's like our guiding light now. It's like, okay, like if we have a compelling idea, it tastes delicious, the people are going to agree. It's not rocket science,
Yeah, that's a fact. Well, I mean, first of all, I think that making a Syrah, any of these wines that you make makes a lot of sense. I mean, none of that is outside of the ordinary. But I really do think, as simple as Lovey Bunches is, which we should take one step back on kind of what it actually is. So this is started at least with Sangiovese, right? You took all of these Sangiovese grapes and you decided to do a whole cluster. So carbonic, I don't know if you're gonna get mad for me saying this, but a carbonic natural type wine that is really well served chilled, which I think is a huge thing to mention here. And was this a risk or was this just a fly by night? Let's give it a shot, because this honestly is a very popular wine. I mean, everybody knows about it here, especially in California, at least. What was the impetus? Why did you start this wine?
It's actually a lot geekier than that, and it'd be a lot more simple if like, oh, we had this idea, but like everything in our company, we fell into it backwards. The thought behind it began in the OOs. I remember Stephen Tanzer, one of the big critics, he just really simply stated Stolpman is a very tannic vineyard, and we never thought of our terroir like that. But it made perfect sense because by the OOs, Reuben was barely irrigating it all, taking advantage of our limestone, the chalk that retained winter rainfall. And our clusters and our grapes were getting smaller and smaller. So that means we have more skin, less juice. So of course, our site was getting more tannic. You know, at the time we took pride in that they were big wines that were tannic. They were going to live forever. We were a collector's winery. The wines weren't delicious a year and a half or 2 years after harvest. You know, they needed time in bottle, but it was kind of a point of pride in the beginning. And we were getting attention for just how serious the wines were. But we had an evolution in our thinking, like, you know, maybe we need to manage the tannin more gently. And we were doing things the way we'd been taught. You know, we fundamentally feel that wine is artisanal and not academic. Nobody in Stolpman got a degree in enology or viticulture. Reuben is the most important person in our company because he's been here officially since 1994, and he can taste all those wines from the 90s, from the OOs, see how they've held up. We remember the weather. We remember our adaptation. And what could we have done differently? And that is how we get better and how we optimize. You know, we'd been taught to do 3 punch downs a day. That's how you extract. That's how you make sure everything's circulated, how you're controlling VA. Wait, we don't need to do that, though. We don't need to extract. So we were getting more and more gentle, working our red wine fermentations to try and get a finer tannin. And at the same time, you know, we'd survived the economic downturn of 08, 09. So by 2012, I was able to buy big, thick concrete fermenters. Then that was kind of an excuse to jump in further into our thought behind, you know, extraction. Right, we have these brand new fermenters, a whole new world of experimentation. So 2012 was the real jump off, where we in the end, the net result was we got way more gentle. And through a few years of evolution, we were doing only 3 punch downs through the entire native fermentation. 10 years earlier, we're doing 3 punch downs a day. And, you know, so we started thinking like, well, the wines are still rich. They're still coating, they're still dark, barely extracting at all. So conversations were starting with like, what if we don't extract? What if we don't even crush? And by luck, a guy named Peter Paston, chef out of DC, was just opening a new pizzeria called Two Amy's. And he had been a longtime mentor of our winemaker at the time, Sashi Mormon. And he went to Sashi and said, hey, you guys have Italian varietals. I need a pizza wine. I'm going to have it. I want to ship it over to DC in big key kegs, you know, better for the environment. It'll be my house pizza wine. I need it delicious, light, low alcohol. And I need it like we're opening in the spring. And the only option for Peter for his pizzeria was Sangiovese. But our classic program at that point, we were aging it in large barrels for 30 months to allow that tannin time to integrate, and also following the rules of Italy, right? The DOCG law that, you know, Brunello di Montalcino Reserva needs to age 5 years before it's released, you know, like, so like the Italians had taught us that, like, okay, we just had an aha moment. If we're to make a crushable, chilled keg pizza wine, we can't pull tannin, right? Because Sangiovese is already a tannic grape, one of the most tannic grapes. And then you take that to Stolpman, where we're not irrigating limestone, we're not getting rainfall, we're dealing with Sangiovese grapes, maybe a third of the size that you'd find in Montalcino or Chianti. You're augmenting that tannin profile even more. So if we're going to make a kegged pizza wine, it has to be whole grape, uncrushed. And we didn't really know what we were going to get. We didn't know if we were going to get like a Rosado style. We didn't know if we were going to get a chilled red, or maybe just a slightly lighter red wine. But we went ahead and did it. And Peter, being a great friend, we knew that as long as it was delicious, he would take it. And we had a little bit left over. And I was, to be honest, I was kind of pissed about it. I'm like, what the hell am I going to do with this? It's too dark to be rosé. It's too light to be red wine. And I think we had like 300 cases, and that's too much, way too much to drink. And I remember being a little like, how did we wind up with 300 cases extra? Like, that's 5 tons. Like, who was doing the math during harvest? And we were like, well, shit, we have to bottle it. We have to label it. And so, for lack of a better idea, we labeled 300 cases, Stolpman Vineyards, carbonic fermentation, Sangiovese. And we even had trouble with
really just rolls off the tongue right there.
Oh yeah. And legally we couldn't call it carbonic Sangiovese on the same line. It had to be 2 different lines to make it legal. It was actually a headache the first vintage, and that's all 2013. But it was delicious, and we started pouring it in our tasting room. People started special ordering it. We stocked a little bit in LA. I forget where it went. It went probably to like 3 or 4 different markets. And before we knew it, we were out of it. And we're like, okay, well, shoot, let's make a little bit extra in 14 and 15. And all of our friends, I think our friends are probably buying well over half of it. And it was nothing more than a few hundred cases. But, selling out of that wine so quick, and it's such a quicker turn than the 30-month oak age regimen. Financially, there was actually good reason to inch the production up a little bit. So, 2 of our friends were getting married in Montana, and they loved that wine. And they said, hey, like, it's such a, happy, joyous, crushable wine. Can we get a few cases as our wedding gift for the reception? And great wedding. A lot of wine people were there. And everybody was crushing Stolpman Vineyards, carbonic fermentation Sangiovese. And pretty hungover the next morning. I was laying in bed, just going through the hashtag of, not hungover, but we were drinking cocktails too. Love you bunches does not make you.
Don't worry, people. People know. People have been to a wedding. Don't worry, they get it.
But I'm just going through the hashtag, and our friend Joni had put up a bottle shot of the wine. Again, the title is too long to repeat, and with the beautiful Montana mountains behind, and her caption didn't really make sense unless you tried the wine and just how happy and lovely and joyous it is. But her quote was, and I'm going to look deep in your eyes, Jason. Nothing says I love you, will you marry me, like carbonic Sangiovese. And that's cool. And that night, a French guy had put a comment up that said, nothing says I love you bunches like carbonic fermentation. And I sat straight up in bed. Jess was actually pregnant with Augie, our older son. And I turned to her, I'm like, baby, we finally have a label for the wine. And she just says, get away from me. Like, don't breathe on me. Go take a shower. You smell like a bar. And then tell me whatever you have to tell me. So I took the quickest shower of my life, came back, I'm like, babe, like, I love you bunches, like carbonic fermentation. That's the label. And in my mind, it was a Post-it note on the fridge. Love you bunches. See you at 5 p.m. Rah, rah. Super casual. Like, it was a Sharpie in my mind. And I was really excited. It was before harvest of 16. So we crept up how much of the 20 acres we're going to take for carbonic, knowing that we finally had a potentially compelling label. And right after harvest, we threw a wine club party under our big oak tree, and we handed everybody a 3x5 card. And we had a bunch of Sharpies and said, just write, I love you bunches. And if we like yours, we'll give you a case. We're going to use your scrawl as the label. And you promise a wine club member a case of wine. And they all took it way too seriously. I just wanted it in quick Post-it note. And people were doing hearts and calligraphy. My team being my team, all the club members left, bottles of tequila showed up out of trunks, and the generator ran out of gas, so we didn't have light, and partied to the wee hours. And Monday morning I come in really eager to see the new Love You Bunches label, and Carrie, our creative director, it's like not enthusiastic. She's like, I've looked through all of them. This is the best, but I still don't love it. I'm like, and my heart sank. I'm like, I thought for sure, like, I was going to see the new label. And she goes, but look at this. And on the bottom of the pile, she pulled out another 3x5 card, and it was in pen, not Sharpie. And the B was like sideways. So it read, I love munches. And then she goes, turn the card around. And in all caps, it just said Ruben. And we just smiled at each other. And she already had a fresh 3x5, a fresh Sharpie. She goes, go find Ruben, no tequila, and have him write it. And so now Ruben, my dad calls him the Scribner. He does all of our anything carbonic, and the So Fresh label, which is like the So Fresh brand is anything we do carbonic, is Ruben's writing, which is pretty fantastic because Ruben is the happiest, most fulfilled person that I've ever known. Grew up subsistent farmer, followed two of his brothers to California, learned everything they knew about viticulture. It took my dad 4 years to sponsor him to get a green card. He and Maria are both full citizens. Again, the godparents of my kids. The hardest worker you're ever going to meet, but just so freaking smart. Just to know that that's his writing on all these happy, delicious, fresh wines makes, to me, the wines even more compelling. But one other note that I'd forgotten, and Kyle reminded me, I had the printer sent me the final press proof. And I'm like, dude, this is it. It's Ruben's writing. And, out in the winery. And Kyle just looked at me and goes, Pete, it's not the Facebook. I'm like, oh, shit, you're right. And Kyle just with two fingers covered up the I. And I called John, our label printer. I'm like, hey, hold it. We need to take the I off. And so it's I Love You Bunches. I'm like, no. That makes it somehow more intimate. Love You Bunches, you can give to your mother-in-law, Sure. Somehow I Love You Bunches, it's like more like, okay, like fifth date. So 2016, Love You Bunches was born. It wasn't overnight, but, we had made a couple hundred cases more wine and sold out even more quickly. And that was an inkling like, okay, where do we go from here? We're a 100% estate grown vineyard operation. We'd never bought fruit before, but people want this wine. So I got on the phone with Ruben and said, hey, tell me about any other Sangiovese that you have planted in Santa Barbara. Because Ruben in 2002 had become a full partner to like the vineyard guru of the county, Jeff Newton. But, as long as Ruben was farming them, I knew the quality would be good. So in 2017, the second vintage of Love You Bunches, we began augmenting simultaneously. We actually entered into a couple planting contracts on land that we didn't own that Ruben was farming, to actually plant the clonal material that we wanted for Love You Bunches at the spacing, really controlling every variable. And then, of course, controlling all the farming protocols, making sure everything's organic. But that was going to be at least a 3-year waiting game for, the new Sangiovese to come online. So in that little interim period, the winemaker at Abon Clement, he started talking shit, like, because he had a little Sangiovese label and said, that Pete Stolpman, he's buying all the freaking good Sangiovese in the entire county. There's nothing available. And I got a hold of him, like, don't worry, like, it'll free up in like 2 more years. Our plantings are going to come online. But yeah, overnight, even in the current political climate, System Baliet in Sweden has kept their 500 case order up. Every release, we immediately ship 500 cases to Sweden, and literally every wine shop in Sweden carries Love You Bunches, and it's just amazing. And the wine is, a light-bodied, chilled. My vineyard crew, they call it rosé con cojones. It's refreshing.
That's a great term.
What are you like, with smoked salmon or something like that, or with like a a seafood salad cold. Like, yeah, you maybe don't want just a rosé. Rosé can get really boring really quickly. And, I love, we've made a lot of wines in the space now, either like a chilled red, or now we do like an Estate Von Gris from Gamay and Trousseau. That's a very deep, like darker than Tavel, just tactile, unfiltered, rosés, chilled reds, kind of in that space in between Provence and a real red wine. So I think it's just, again, we found it captivating, and it's so cool that not only like our customers, but then like new markets, all of a sudden like, yeah, we need that. We need that in every shop in Sweden.
I wonder if you discovered a niche that you didn't know existed, or you just did it better for a niche that already you knew existed. I mean, what I guess I'm wondering is, because the wine itself is it's a natural wine, right? I mean, you could call it that. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That cognizant. I mean, you were making wines that were not natural. They were, like you said, collector's wines, bigger wines, things that, but for you to take this step and make this wine, it just feels, I don't know. I don't meet anybody who's like, I don't like Lovey Bunches. There's nobody, I mean, I don't mean to politicize the natural wine thing, but sometimes it gets that way, but everybody loves this wine. So it's a really fascinating thing to think that its identity is not just a natural wine. It's not just a carbonic wine. It's not just a summer wine. It's sort of a weird, all of these things. And I'm trying to figure out how you pulled it off. I mean, there's so many winemakers who would give anything to have this work for them. People trying to throw stuff at the wall all the time. And it seems like you threw 6 balls and they all stuck. I'm trying to figure out how this worked.
Again, we fell backwards into it on every step of that journey. And I'm so grateful that we did. But the natural wine conversation is very important. I have a lot to be thankful for the natural wine movement, because even if you didn't like a lot of the wines, you are now accustomed to seeing cloudy white wine, orange wine, very light colored reds. It really opened the rainbow for all of us, right? That even if you didn't like them, they were now, a segment. And I'm not just saying the natty section of a shop, but rather, again, opening the rainbow to all not just white, pink, red. And, without that market acceptance, I think it'd be much more challenging to have debuted and quickly grown a chilled red. But it also calls to attention just how important branding is. And you said something like, we weren't making natural wine. We weren't making natty wine, right? But just having Ruben's handwriting on the label all of a sudden had the appearance of a natty wine, which it fit, right? Because it is a chilled red. And then just to talk about, so our approach to natural winemaking, we're certified organic, certified biodynamic, across the board. Whether we're talking about our $128 Syrah, we are minimalistic in sulfur additions, right? All of our fanciest red wines go through primary without any sulfur. When it came to Lovey Bunches, we're like, wait, this wine has stearic acid. It's early picked Sangiovese. We're relying on the acid because we know we're not going to pull any tannin. So we want that early pick, low alcohol, high acid profile. We have to be more generous with our sulfur adds in a lower acid environment that all the weird stuff likes to happen in. Sure, but if you have a very high acid environment, you really don't need sulfur. It was well thought out. Like, we're never going to add sulfur if we don't need it, right? I like to drink 2, 3, 4 bottles of Lovey Bunches in a good evening, and I like to feel great in the morning because my kids wake up at 6:30. So I mean, the wines are natural, not natty. The really interesting thing, though, is like that goes for all of our wines, but the branding is crucial.
You're sort of in an interesting thing with the label. I mean, a lot of luck here, but I look at the IPAs and the natural wines. The label is such an important concept with those 2 markets. I mean, most IPAs now look like a Grateful Dead concert, and most natural wines. And I'm pigeonholing a huge sector of wines, but they're very bright and odd and hallucinogenic in some cases. Like, it's like, oh my God. But there also is a simplicity that you have with your label that could go either direction. It just feels welcoming. So, I mean, I know that when we talk about business that works, it's always great to be like, here's why it worked. But we both know there's a lot of, what would you call it? Luck in the stew, you know? And I mean, I just wanted to highlight a story where something worked for somebody. I know right now I talk to people and they're trying to come up with, there's not a lot of R&D happening in wine. People aren't trying anything interesting because they're so afraid that the profit margins are so low right now. So everybody listening, it can work. It just doesn't happen. You know, wine is not something you can flip a switch and go, look at this new thing I made. I mean, your story took 10 years to be where you are with this Lovey Bunches, at least, right?
Right. And I mean, looking at the arc of my career, again, I'm so thankful to have this brand. It's a very important part of our quiver. But, you know, until Lovey Bunches, we were a wine geek or collector's brand. The bulk of my customer really cares about wine. And I take great pride in that. You know, like our Syrah, like, should be rich and intense, but bright and with energy and raw and captivating. And I hope that people are like thinking about every sip of Syrah they're taking, right? But what Lovey Bunches did, it's still a compelling wine. Like the idea that it's this high acid, bone dry, sulfur free Sangiovese, you know, uncrushed, like that.
Sure.
But the fact that the label, the branding, gets people who might just enjoy wine or grabbing a bottle as a gift. And then hopefully they're like, wow, this is really good. I'm going to keep buying it. I'm going to keep giving it as gifts. And it's just amazing that it's given me access to the much greater wine market. You know, we're still like the vast majority independent, you know, wholesale. Our only national account is Whole Foods. And, you know, they're a great partner.
Pretty good national account to have.
Yeah. And we have a bunch of great, you know, regional partners, but, you know, it feels really good that, you know, to kind of have our feet in both really esoteric fine wine, you know, that's a whole different conversation on what we're doing with Syrah these days. And then to actually have wine that you don't need to push it. If you put it on a shelf or behind a bar, people are like, yeah, I want to try that. Or, oh my God, I love that. And yeah, it's just a real blessing to have been able to get a little more financial stability through this brand. And again, we fell into it every step of the way. So got to be grateful.
The best, man. Pete, it's great to have you on. And honestly, this wine, the reason I want to do this podcast is it's just beloved by, you know, my house in particular. So thanks for making it. That's all I have to say. It's nice to have something that's crushable during the summer, but also good during the winter. So nice work. Well, thank you, my friend. And I hope everybody listening has either tried this wine, or if you're in Sweden, of course you have already. All right, buddy. Well, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, so much for listening. We really appreciate it. Remember, I don't know if you listened last week, but we mentioned that we are going to do a mailbag episode. I want your questions, I want your comments. Hit us up at any of the social media accounts, mine or else SomTV or SomFilms, or email us, hello@somtv.com. I want to know your questions for an upcoming mailbag episode. For any of our cast, crew, myself, whatever, send it to us. I want to thank my podcast producer, John Adams, who's always here doing a great job with this pod. I want to thank our guest, Pete Stolpman, and I want to thank you most of all. You listeners, the reason we do this. Please rate and review us. Give us a great rating. It means a lot. Go to somtv.com also, because you can watch this episode right now if you'd like to. And you can get 50% off a SomTV subscription by using SomTV50 at checkout. All right, everybody, be safe, and we will talk next week.